Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. T. Sai Chandramouli, former Associate Professor of English, Railway College, Osmania University, Hyderabad. In this module, we discuss the salient features of the poetry of G.M. Hopkins and Thomas Hardy. Gerard Manley Hopkins was born in the year 1844 and departed in the year 1889. While Thomas Hardy made his grand entry in the year 1940 and departed in the year 1928. They belong to an age that has moved beyond Romanticism, and in a way they can be clubbed with emerging modern poets, postmodern poets. Both had a romantic longing for nature. Hardy attempted to find nature an alternative to God, whereas Hopkins tried to find God in every aspect of nature. Primarily, nature obsessed them. Nature fired their imagination, and inspired by nature, they wrote beautiful poetry, alluring poetry. Hopkins was greatly influenced by the aesthetic theories of Walter Pater and John Ruskin, and the poetry of devout Anglican George Herbert and Christina Rossetti. Most of his poems were not published during his lifetime. Robert Bridges arranged for their publication in the year 1918. When we go through the poems of Gerald Manley Hopkins, we come across three aspects in his poetry: in escape, in stress, and sprung rhythm. He created his own terms of poetic style with these three concepts or terms: inscape, in stress, sprung rhythm. Inscape is supposed to mean the unified complex of characteristics that give each thing its uniqueness. In stress is to be the force of being which holds inscape together. Sprung rhythm was Hopkins' own experiment with the pattern of English poetry. He made experiments with the metrical pattern of English poetry and came out with what's famously known as a sprung rhythm today. The green surroundings of his growing up years had a lasting influence on him. Just like any other child, he involved himself in observing and enjoying the beauty of nature, which transformed him into a beautiful poet. He can't be a romantic poet because of the age in which he was born, but probably he shared some of the chief characteristics of those poets and their poetry. Nature became a recurring motif in many of his important poems. After joining the Jesuits, however, he decided to burn his old drafts and devoted himself more to his new religion. That just shows his commitment, dedication, and a principled way of approach to life, principled way of doing things. Hopkins was obsessed with the minute aspects of external world, and he believed that a conception of nature and society that anticipated ecological theory is a good one for the betterment of mankind, welfare of humanity, that is manifested today by global warming and negligence of nature, destruction of nature by man. In order to prevent all these evil effects only, he advocated that man should be in love with nature and he should worship nature as God. The tripartite relation between God, man, and nature is the cornerstone of both Hopkins' poetry and also of the poetry written by Thomas Hardy. For I. Richards, I quote, "The central difficulty of Hopkins' poetry was the deep schism he saw between priestly convictions and poetic ambitions." So here Richards is trying to find a conflict or a chasm caused by virtue of Hopkins' religious belief, practice, and life, and his love for nature and its portrayal in his poetry. The Wreck of the Deutschland. Hopkins reacts to the sinking of the German ship SS Deutschland near the English coast en route to New York. He is anguished to hear about the death of 5 Franciscan nuns who had boarded the ship to escape Protestant persecution in their homeland. Hopkins is shocked with what he perceives as God's harsh treatment of his own true followers. The first part begins with his doubt about God's ways. If you remember Paradise Lost, Milton starts Paradise Lost with his intention to justify the ways of God. But here you find Hopkins doubting the way of God. Perhaps this is the progress made by man and his modern way of looking at things in a rational manner. In part second, Hopkins embarks upon a description of the shipwreck. Stanza 12 marks the opening of the second part and begins as a factual description. As we proceed further, it becomes clear that Hopkins' desire is to see the wreck of the ship more as a physical manifestation of God's terrifying power and tender mercy than as a mere accident and turned fatal. Here one is reminded of William Blake's 2 poems, The Lamb and the Tiger. In these 2 poems, William Blake tries to establish the fact that God, who is capable of creating a tender, innocent, loving creature like the lamb, is also capable of creating a terrifying, formidable animal like or a force like the tiger. So this just shows the ambivalent ways in which God manifests himself, and also it is a tribute to his creative power, and also a tribute to his ability to control the world through his acts of mercy, as well as desire to punish the evildoers. Hardy's poetry, the underlying tone of what most critics of his fiction refer to as a devout pessimism, continues to reverberate even in his poems. But personally, I feel that he was not a pessimist as many people perceive, but he is an optimist. Otherwise, his heroes or his protagonists in his novels won't be struggling till the last moment of their lives. They would have given up leaving this world at the moment they felt desperate and miserable about themselves and their meager, limited capabilities. So, whether Hardy is a pessimist or an optimist is a question to be debated upon, and the conclusion depends on one's own way of looking at things, one's own viewpoint, and one's own way of analyzing the poetry of Thomas Hardy. In later years, Hardy preferred to call himself an evolutionary meliorist. Hardy began writing poetry in the year 1860 and subsequently in the decade, and later turned to writing novels. He stopped writing after the public outrage against his novel Jude the Obscure. At the age of 58, he published his first collection of poetry, Wessex Poems, published in the year 1898. The reader remembers well, or the reader should be advised to remember that his novels are also called Wessex novels. Subsequently, Hardy is known as a Wessex novelist or a Wessex writer. Wessex doesn't exist geographically or physically anywhere in England. It's an imaginary rural landscape Hardy has visualized upon, invented, imagined, and immortalized through his works, both in his poetry and in his fiction. Hardy's most moving poems were, however, written after his wife Emma's death in the year 1912. Hardy also reflected on public events like the Boer War, the turn of the century, the death of the Queen, even the Titanic disaster. This goes to prove that he was a person keeping a watch on the events occurring around him, responding as desired or as is expected of a poet like him, and also reacting like any other common human being to the disastrous events happening around a human being. If one doesn't respond, he ceases to be a human being. If one doesn't compose a poem or write a fiction or piece of fiction, he ceases to be a writer or a poet. Phase 1 of Hardy's poetry consists of his work based on Darwin's theory of evolution in about 1862. And he began reading Schopenhauer's about 1866 subsequently. This period approximately marks the first phase of his development. Poems of this phase express, I quote, the pessimistic view that insensate natural laws rules the world, unquote, full stop. Phase 2 of Hardy's poetry. Here one can say that the second phase extends from about 1886 and continues till the completion of the work, the Dinas, in 1908. Poems of this phase reflect his philosophic speculations borrowed from the metaphysics of Arthur Schopenhauer and Edward von Hartmann. Phase 3 of Hardy's poetry. Here we can talk about his poetry starting from the year 1908. His works clearly stand testimony to an interpretation of natural laws. So what he was is a bit difficult to define, and it is also a bit difficult to defend his viewpoint unless one knows the evolution of his poetic thought, the evolution of his poetic craftsmanship. His early poems express deepest pessimism as seen in his novels. This is the general impression of people about Hardy and his work, that he was a pessimist to the core, which I feel is not at all justified. The poem Discouragement, dated 1863 to 67, attacks human folly and social convention rather than injustice in natural law. So this goes against the normal opinion that he finds malevolent nature operating to stultify, stifle, and sniff life of man on this earth. He did the same first in his first novel, The Poor Man and the Lady Did. The second phase. The second phase of Hardy's poetics is largely influenced by the metaphysics of Arthur Schopenhauer's The World as Will and Idea, and later Edward von Hartmann's philosophy of the unconscious. Poems written in the second phase that treat the will assume it to be a mental force, an unconscious mind. Was he thinking and planning to work and express himself along the lines of Sigmund Freud? One may get a doubt, because here concepts of conscious mind, unconscious mind, of course no mention of subconscious mind is made. Hardy found among Hartmann's speculations the idea that growth of consciousness in the will might bring about remorse and discretion or cosmic suicide, unquote, full stop. In an exceptional poem titled Before Life and After, created in the year 1909, Hardy debates the birth of consciousness, therefore pain. There's an interesting discussion going on in the virtual world about this concept of consciousness and what consciousness can do to anything. They go to the extent of saying that consciousness, learning of grammar is nothing but developing consciousness about the way one should speak or one should write. Consciousness is not limited to psychology or psychoanalysis alone, but it is related to the day-to-day functioning of human mind, human thinking, human actions. The third phase of his development, Hardy based his meliorism on science, interpreting the process of evolution better than he did in 1860s. He arrived at his evolutionary meliorism. Here, Hardy used symbols of metaphysical images he developed in the period of the Dinas. The poems written during this phase show Hardy's changed perspective on evolution. In his early reactions to evolutionary theory, Hardy imagined that man would throw away the opportunity nature provides him. By his concepts of metaphysical world, metaphysical thinking, metaphysical poetry, etc., bring to our mind the beautiful poetry written by metaphysical poets like John Donne and others. So it's a debatable question whether he is carrying certain elements or characteristics of these metaphysical poets in his work too. However, in his final phase, Hardy placed his hope on man alone and believed that eventually human intelligence may find upward way. This in itself nullifies the theory or feeling that he was a pessimist. When he says on man alone, probably he means that it is the responsibility of man alone to redeem himself, to resurrect himself, to protect himself, and to save himself. He should be his own redeemer. He need not wait for the return of the Christ. He need not wait for the return of the Redeemer. So this just shows what a robust optimist Thomas Hardy is, though generally he is branded as a pessimist poet or a pessimist writer. Pessimism doesn't mark his poetry at all.